High in the mountains, where storms bury secrets, an old man found something he wasn't supposed to touch. A snow leopard cub, blind, half dead, and worth more than gold to the wrong kind of man. This is the story of how a broken husky, a loner with nothing left to lose, and a cub who couldn't see the world, changed the meaning of family forever. The wind screamed through the pines like a wounded animal, biting at Benjamin Mitchell's face as he trudged through knee-deep snow. At 67, these mountain walks were his only company since his wife passed until he heard it. A whimper, fainter than the wind, but it stopped him dead. Behind a frostbitten log, a ball of matted fur trembled. Not a fox, not a wolf, a snow leopard cub, its clouded eyes staring right through him, its ribs heaving against the cold. Benjamin's breath caught. In these mountains, finding a cub meant one thing. Its mother was gone, and this one couldn't even see death coming. Benjamin's gnarled hands hovered over the cub. Every scar on those hands told a story, most of them about loss. 5 years since the avalanche took Sarah. 2 since he'd spoken to another human for more than groceries. The cub's nose twitched, sniffing the air between ragged breaths. Logic said leave it, nature's way. But then he noticed the frostbite on its paws, the way its tiny chest hitched, just like Sarah's had in that hospital bed. His throat tightened. The cub would die by morning, unless he did the one thing he'd sworn never to do again, care. Something moved in the trees behind him. Benjamin spun, heart hammering. Not a bear, not yet. His 15-year-old husky, Stella, stood rigid, her gray muzzle quivering. That dog hadn't left the porch in a year, not since her last litter was stillborn. Yet here she was, ears pricked forward, staring at the cub with an intensity Benjamin hadn't seen since she was a pup herself. The cub whimpered again. Stella let out a sound Benjamin hadn't heard in a decade, a low, crooning whine from deep in her chest. Before he could stop her, the old dog limped forward and began licking the cub's frozen fur. Back in the cabin, by the fire's glow, Benjamin saw the truth. The cub's eyes weren't just cloudy. They were milk-white, blind since birth probably. It stumbled in circles, bumping into chair legs, flinching at its own shadow. Stella followed every wobbling step, her tail sweeping the floorboards. When the cub tripped, she nudged it upright with her nose. When it cried, she licked its face clean. Benjamin watched, his coffee going cold. He'd seen huskies herd, hunt, even grieve, but never this. Never mother a natural enemy. The cub pawed at Stella's face, and when its claws snagged her fur, she didn't even growl, just sighed, like she'd been waiting for this unruly child all her life. The blizzard rattled the windows as Benjamin paced. He'd wrapped the cub in Sarah's old sweater, the blue one she'd died in. Stupid sentiment, stupider risk. Snow leopards weren't pets. This one would grow claws that could gut a man, blind or not. Across the room, Stella had curled around the cub, her breathing synced to its tiny ribs. "We can't keep it," Benjamin told her. The dog didn't lift her head. He reached for the cub and Stella's lip curled. Just slightly, just enough. Benjamin recoiled. In 12 years, she'd never bared teeth at him. Not even when he'd taken her dead puppies away. His hand shook. That's when he knew. This wasn't his choice anymore. Dawn bled through the cabin's single window. Benjamin had spent the night watching Stella teach the cub things no dog should know. She dragged a scrap of deer hide across the floor, letting the cub pounce on its rustling sound. When it missed, she'd nudge it closer. When it caught the hide, she'd wagged like it was the greatest hunt in history. Benjamin rubbed his aching knees. He'd studied wildlife biology for 40 years. Knew every textbook rule. Predators don't nurture competitors. Prey doesn't cuddle its hunter. Yet here was proof that every rule had an exception. The cub, exhausted, flopped against Stella's belly. The old dog licked between its ears with the same devotion she'd once shown her own pups. Benjamin looked away. Some bonds defied explanation. By midnight, the storm had swallowed the world outside. The cubamo, Benjamin had started calling him, lay sprawled across Stella's paws, his breathing finally steady. Benjamin dozed in his chair, jerking awake when a whimper cut through the wind. Mo was shaking, his blind eyes wide with some nightmare only he could see. Stella whined, licking his face, but the cub kept trembling. Without thinking, Benjamin knelt beside them. He hummed the same tuneless lullaby he'd sung Sarah during her worst nights. Mo's ears twitched. His nose found Benjamin's calloused hand. For the first time, the cub's muscles relaxed. Stella exhaled, resting her chin on Benjamin's knee. 3 hearts beat in the dark. The storm raged on, but inside those walls, something fragile had taken root. M.O. Benjamin tested the name aloud as he spooned warm broth into a chipped bowl. Short for mountain. Short for momentum. Mostly short because the cub couldn't afford a name that took too long to say when danger came. Stella watched as M.O. sniffed the air, following the broth's steam like a compass. His first real meal. When his tiny tongue lapped at the bowl, broth dripped onto his chest. Stella cleaned it off meticulously, like she was memorizing his scent. Benjamin's throat tightened. He'd named dozens of animals over the years, research subjects, mostly. Never one he planned to keep. M.O. sneezed, splattering broth across Benjamin's boots. The old man surprised himself by laughing. Stella's tail thumped. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Benjamin realized. He was already too late. They were family now. Benjamin found Stella's collar in the cedar chest, the one with the tiny bells Sarah had sewn on years ago. As he fastened it around Stella's neck, the old dog stiffened. She hadn't worn it since that terrible winter when her pups came too early. The bells had jingled with every lick she'd given their still forms. Now, as M.O. perked up at the new sound, Stella's eyes locked onto Benjamin's. There was grief there, yes, but something else too. Purpose. M.O. stumbled toward the jingling, his paws slipping on the hardwood. Stella stood rock still, letting him crash into her legs. Then, with infinite patience, she nudged him upright and took a single step back. The bells jingled. Mo's ears swiveled. Step by step, bell by bell, Stella was teaching him to navigate a world he'd never see. A week in, the cabin bore the marks of Mo's journey. Scratches on the doorframe where he'd misjudged a leap. A shattered mug Benjamin hadn't loved anyway. Stella shadowed the cub's every move, her bells a constant chorus. When M.O. veered toward the wood stove, she body-blocked him. When he tangled in the curtains, she gently pulled him free. Benjamin watched from his chair, his journal open to an empty page. For 40 years, he'd recorded wildlife behavior with clinical precision. Now he found himself sketching instead. Stella's ears pricked forward. Mo's tail held high despite his stumbles. Outside, the mountains loomed, uncaring. Inside, against all odds, life had taken root in the unlikeliest of gardens. Benjamin closed the journal. Some stories couldn't be captured in notes. Benjamin saw them first at dawn, fresh tracks circling the cabin. Too large for a wolf, too deep for a hiker. The right boot had that distinctive split heel he'd seen last fall on Garrick Holt, the fur trapper who'd bragged about getting $20,000 for a snow leopard pelt in China. Stella's growl vibrated through the floorboards as she stood over M.O., her matted fur bristling. Benjamin's hunting rifle whispered as he lifted it from its hooks. After 30 years of peace, the mountains had finally sent trouble to his door. The words slithered through the cracked window at midday. Garrick's shadow stretched across the porch where M.O. lay sunning himself, blissfully unaware. Stella's lips peeled back from yellowed teeth. Benjamin's finger hovered near the trigger as the trapper leaned in, reeking of tobacco and greed. "Ain't right keeping that from its natural habitat, old man." The lie hung between them like gun smoke. Garrick's gloved hand twitched toward his belt knife. Somewhere in the trees, a raven screamed. Sarah had hated it, called it a coward's solution the day he'd buried their son. Now Benjamin knelt with arthritis screaming in his knees, dragging the locked case from under the bed. The steel was cold. Familiar. Stella whined as M.O. bumped into the dresser, his nose quivering at the sudden scent of oil and fear. Outside, Garrick's laughter carried on the wind. Benjamin's thumb found the combination dial. October 15th, 93. Their anniversary. The lock sprang open with a sound like breaking ice. The radio crackled its last warning before the power died. Whiteout conditions by nightfall. Benjamin nailed the last board over the chicken coop as snow stung his face. They'd need every scrap of meat now that Garrick knew. Inside, Stella had herded Mo into the closet, her body a barricade against his whimpering. Benjamin's breath fogged in the sudden dark as the storm swallowed the sun whole. This wasn't just weather. It was nature's mercy, one last chance to disappear. Stella dropped the still warm jackrabbit at Mo's paws. The cub startled at the coppery scent, then lunged with comical enthusiasm straight into the woodpile. Benjamin bit back a laugh as Stella patiently dragged the rabbit closer. Mo's next pounce connected, his tiny fangs sinking into fur. A kill he didn't make for prey he couldn't see. But as Stella licked his triumphant face, Benjamin's smile faded. Real hunting meant blood, and blood left trails even blizzards couldn't erase. One misstep, that's all it took on the icy ridge. Mo's claws scraped shale as he plummeted 10 feet into the deadfall. Benjamin's shout echoed off the canyon walls as Stella hurled herself after him. The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, the sound that would haunt Benjamin forever, Stella's howl. The same one she'd made holding her dead pups. When he reached them, Mo's leg bent all wrong. Stella's flank was streaked red where branches had torn through. And beneath them both, Benjamin's stitches were clumsy but tight. Mo would walk again. Stella wouldn't leave his side even as her own wounds seeped into the towels. The cabin reeked of whiskey and iron as Benjamin scrubbed his hands raw. Outside, the blizzard erased the world. Inside, 3 truths remained. Garrick had found their sanctuary. Stella was weakening. And Mo licked his splinted leg with quiet determination. His blind eyes fixed on the door as if he could already see what was coming. 3 days without sleep. That's how broken Benjamin was when the pounding came. He raised the rifle, finger trembling on the trigger, only to see Amanda haze through the peephole, her parka dusted with snow. The wildlife ranger's gaze went straight to Mo's corner, where Stella stood guard over the sleeping cub. "Ben," she sighed, unclipping her radio. "You know what happens to blind predators in captivity. The unspoken if Garrick doesn't get him first, hung between them like a noose." Amanda's gloved hand hovered over her radio. The mountain sanctuary was overflowing budget cuts, she explained. But her eyes lingered on Stella's graying muzzle, the way she'd positioned herself between Mo and the door. "Unless," Amanda chewed her lip, "there's that new enclosure up north. For special cases." Special. A kind word for hopeless. Benjamin looked at Mo, who'd somehow found Amanda's boot and was gumming the laces. Stella's tail gave one half-hearted wag. The closest thing to trust she'd shown a stranger in years. Benjamin packed by candlelight. Sarah's quilt. Stella's chewed tennis ball. The photo of their son at 7, grinning beside his first trout. Mo sniffed each item as it entered the duffel, his ears swiveling at every creak of the old cabin. Stella watched from the rug, her breathing labored. Outside, the storm had paused, just for tonight. Just long enough for Benjamin to second-guess every choice that led here. When he finally sat beside them, Stella rested her head on his knee. Mo flopped across both their laps. Some goodbyes didn't need eyes to see. Amanda Hayes shifted into low gear as the mountain road narrowed, her knuckles whitening on the wheel. Benjamin hadn't seen her since the avalanche recovery, when she'd pulled Sarah's body from the snow while he watched helplessly. Now her eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror where Mo lay draped across Stella in the back seat. "That enclosure I mentioned?" she said quietly. "It's got heated rocks, raised platforms, everything a blind climber would need." The unspoken, unlike last time, hung between them as the truck climbed higher. Every mile stripped another layer from Benjamin's resolve. Mo pressed his nose against the frigid window, his breath fogging the glass in quick bursts. Stella panted beside him, her muzzle twitching at each new scent. Pine giving way to sagebrush, then the sharp tang of diesel from a passing logging truck. Benjamin counted fence posts to avoid looking at the duffel by his feet. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay the only things he couldn't bear to leave behind. Sarah's letters, his son's fishing lure, and a single silver bell from Stella's collar. The mountains watched them go. The sanctuary entrance was smaller than Benjamin expected. Just a rusted cattle gate with a hand-painted sign reading Wild Hearts. Amanda had to kick ice from the latch. Stella stiffened as unfamiliar animal cries echoed through the valley. The scream of a lynx, the huff of a grizzly, the eerie chatter of Arctic foxes. Mo tumbled from the truck and immediately tripped over his own feet, sending up a puff of snow. When Benjamin reached to steady him, the cub startled, then recognized the calloused hands and leaned in hard enough to knock the old man off balance. Some lessons, it seemed, stuck. The vet approached with gloves that smelled of antiseptic. Mo scrambled backward into Stella's legs, his claws catching in her fur. The husky didn't move, didn't blink, just stared down the stranger until Amanda cleared her throat. "She's protective," Benjamin warned as the vet hesitated. Protective was an understatement. Stella had positioned herself between Mo and every exit, her ears flat against her skull. It took 3 tries before the cub allowed a stethoscope near his chest, and only because Stella licked his face between attempts. The vet's eyebrows climbed when she checked Stella's stitches. "These should be infected," she murmured. "It's like her body's refusing to quit." Amanda held out the enclosure key longer than necessary, her palm upturned. "We can find someone else too." Benjamin snatched it mid-sentence. The metal bit into his fingers. Behind him, Stella had already herded Mo toward the cedar stump platform, her bells jingling with each limping step. The cub stumbled twice, then found his footing on the textured bark, his first successful climb. Benjamin's throat tightened. Amanda studied the trio. The arthritic man, the dying dog, the blind cub. 3 months, she conceded. After that, the board votes. Benjamin didn't thank her. Some debts couldn't be spoken. Benjamin stood frozen long after Amanda's taillights disappeared. Somewhere in the pines, a wolf answered the fading rumble of the engine. A deep, lonely sound that raised the hair on his neck. Stella's answering howl came from right behind him, ragged at the edges but unwavering. Mo joined in with an enthusiastic yowl that dissolved into sneezes. The old man's laughter surprised them all. That night, as the temperature plummeted, 3 shapes curled together in the straw. One gray-muzzled, one milk-eyed, one trembling with more than cold. The mountains listened. Amanda's handwriting slanted across the page like wind-blown grass. Asterisk Garrick's asking about snow leopard permits at the tavern. Watch the south fence line. Asterisk Benjamin fed the note to the stove and watched Sarah's quilt instead, where Stella had pinned Mo beneath one paw, vigorously grooming his ears while he wriggled. The vet said the husky had weeks left, maybe days. Yet here she was, teaching the cub to wrestle like she'd done with her pups all those years ago. Benjamin reached for his rifle. Some lessons couldn't be taught twice. Mo's paws twitched in sleep as he chased phantom prey through dreams. On the platform above, Stella slept with one eye open, the way she had since Garrick's visit. Benjamin counted their breaths between sips of bitter coffee. 3 months ago, he'd been ready to join Sarah. Now he found himself praying to a god he'd long ignored. Not for himself, not even for Stella, but for the cub currently bunny-kicking a defenseless teddy bear Amanda had smuggled in. Outside, the first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall, the kind that buried trails. And men. Stella's growl woke Benjamin an hour before dawn. The dog stood rigid at the enclosure gate, her lips curled over yellowed teeth. Beyond the fence, shadows moved against the tree line. Too tall for wolves, too quiet for rangers. Benjamin's fingers found the rifle stock beneath his cot as Mo sniffed the air, confused. Then the wind shifted, carrying the unmistakable stench of chewing tobacco and unwashed leather. Garrick. The trapper's flashlight beam sliced through the dark, lingering on the cub's milky eyes. "Well, ain't that a shame?" came the raspy chuckle. "Pelt's still good, though." Benjamin's shotgun clicked empty just as Garrick lunged for Mo. The cub yowled as the trapper's gloved hand closed around his scruff. then screamed when Stella's teeth sank into Garrick's forearm. The husky weighed less than the man's backpack, but her grip was absolute. Garrick howled, flinging her against the fence post. The impact made a sound Benjamin would hear in nightmares. Mo went berserk, clawing up Garrick's chest blindly. Somewhere beyond the pain, beyond the roaring in his ears, Benjamin registered two things. Stella wasn't moving, and the .22 now pointed at Mo's head. Benjamin's hands shook as Garrick pulled the trigger, but the gun only clicked. Empty. The trapper's eyes widened as Mo wrenched free, his claws raking Garrick's face. Benjamin lunged with his hunting knife, but Garrick was faster, swinging the rifle like a club. The stock connected with Benjamin's temple with a sickening crack. The old man crumpled to the snow, his vision swimming. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Stella's limp body by the fence, and Mo standing over her, snarling at Garrick with a courage that defied his blindness. Benjamin woke to snowflakes melting on his face and a searing pain in his skull. The world came back in pieces, the metallic taste of blood, the distant wail of sirens, the weight of Mo curled against his chest. The cub's fur was matted with crimson, but Benjamin couldn't tell whose it was. He tried to sit up, but a gloved hand pressed him down. Amanda's face swam into view, her mouth moving but the words lost in the ringing in his ears. Beyond her, a stretcher carried a still form draped in a tarp. Too small to be Garrick. Too still to be. Sheriff O'Connell's boots crunched through the blood-stained snow. "Garrick's in the wind," he muttered, kicking the trapper's abandoned rifle. Left a trail a blind man could follow, though. His eyes flicked to Mo, who hadn't moved from Benjamin's side since the Rangers arrived. The cub's ears twitched at every sound, his nose pressed into the old man's jacket. Amanda knelt beside them, her fingers brushing Stella's collar, still jingling softly in the wind. "She saved them both," she whispered. The sheriff removed his hat. Some heroes walked on four legs. The sanctuary staff offered to remove Stella's body. Benjamin refused. He carried her himself, her weight frighteningly light in his arms, back to the enclosure she'd claimed as home. Mo trailed behind, bumping into every rock and root, his whines growing more desperate as Stella's scent faded. Benjamin laid her in the den she'd dug for them, tucking Sarah's quilt around her still form. Mo nosed at her ears, her paws, her tail, waiting for the lick that would never come. When the cub finally lifted his clouded eyes, Benjamin swore the animal understood. Grief, it seemed, needed no sight. At dawn, Benjamin found the blood trail, drops leading into the pines like breadcrumbs. Garrick's. The sheriff had called off the search when the storm hit, but Benjamin knew these mountains. Knew the trapper would head for the old mining shack near Deadman's Pass. He loaded his rifle with hands that didn't shake. Mo sat at his heels, his head cocked toward the sounds of the forest. The cub's ears swiveled north, toward Garrick, toward vengeance. Benjamin hesitated. Then he reached down, letting Mo sniff the gunpowder on his palms. "Not for you," he murmured. But the way the cub bared his teeth said otherwise. By week's end, the story had spread. How a blind snow leopard fought like a demon. How an old husky gave her life protecting him. At the Wild Rose Tavern, trappers avoided Benjamin's corner table, their eyes darting to Mo curled at his feet. The cub's ears flicked at every mention of Stella's name. Behind the bar, the owner hung a new photo, blurry but unmistakable, of a gray-muzzled husky standing guard over a white cub. The caption read, ***, the ghost and her shadow. ***, Benjamin left before last call. Mo's bell collar jingling like Stella's used to. Some legends didn't need embellishment. The mining shack loomed ahead, its roof sagging under fresh snow. Benjamin's knees screamed with every step, but Mo never faltered, his nose guiding them unerringly toward Garrick's stench. The cub moved differently now, purposeful, lethal. Benjamin's finger hovered near the trigger as they reached the door. Inside, a groan, curse, then silence. He braced himself, rifle raised, only to find Garrick slumped against the far wall, his arm mangled, his face a mask of terror. The trapper's eyes locked on Mo, That thing came back, he rasped. Like it could see me. Benjamin didn't correct him. Some truths were kinder as myths. The snow began again as they descended the mountain. Benjamin carried Mo now, the cub exhausted from the trek, his nose still twitching for Stella's absent scent. Halfway down, Benjamin stumbled. Mo yelped as they fell, rolling together in a drift. When the old man sat up, snow clinging to his beard, Mo did something unexpected. He pounced. Not blindly, but directly at the jingle of Benjamin's keys. The old man froze. Mo pounced again. This time at a falling pine cone he couldn't possibly have seen. But heard? Yes, like Stella had taught him. Benjamin's laugh turned into a sob. The lessons had stuck after all. Spring came late that year. Benjamin stood at the sanctuary gate, Mo leaning against his leg as Amanda unlatched the enclosure. Inside, something moved. A gray-muzzled husky limping toward them, her tail wagging despite the scars. Mo went rigid, then exploded forward in a flurry of snow and joyful yips, knocking Stella over with the force of his greeting. Benjamin's knees gave out. Amanda caught his arm. "We found her at dawn," she whispered, heart still beating. The old man couldn't speak. Some miracles defied explanation. Just like the way Stella was currently wrestling Mo exactly as she had before, like death had been nothing but an inconvenience. The new cabin was smaller than the old one, but the mantle held the same treasures. Sarah's letters, his son's fishing lure, and now a framed photo. In it, a grizzled man sat between a graying husky and a nearly grown snow leopard, their heads tilted together like conspirators. Mo's pole rested on Stella's back, his milky eyes half-closed in contentment. Benjamin touched the frame, his fingers lingering on Stella's face. The vet said she shouldn't have survived. The rangers said Mo would never adapt. Yet here they were, proof that love could rewrite even nature's cruelest rules. Outside, the wind carried the sound of jingling bells as Mo chased Stella through the meadow. Blind, happy, home. Benjamin leaned on the fence as morning light painted the valley gold. The sanctuary director, Dr. Chun, adjusted her glasses. "We never told you." Stella's records showed terminal cancer 6 months before she met Mo. Benjamin's grip tightened on the railing. Behind them, Mo playfully tackled Stella into a wildflower patch, her wagging tail sending petals flying. The doctor smiled. Yet here she is. Some bonds outlast even biology. A breeze carried the sound of jingling bells. Stella's collar, still on Mo. Mo crouched low, his nose twitching. Stella lay motionless beside him, no longer leading, just watching. The jackrabbit never saw the blur of white fur coming. Mo's takedown was messy, triumphant. Stella limped over and licked his bloody muzzle exactly as she'd done with her pups. Benjamin turned away, throat tight. This was the mercy he'd denied them both. The right to be what nature intended. When he looked back, Mo was dragging his prize toward Stella. An offering. A thank you. Amanda's official seal gleamed in the lamplight. Asterisk, permanent caretaker status approved. Asterisk, Benjamin exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Outside, Stella barked, her signal that Mo was climbing too high again. The old man smiled. Somewhere between blizzards and bloodstains, this had become home. He tucked the letter beside Sarah's photo. She'd have loved this wild, improbable family. The hurricane knocked out power for 3 days. Benjamin found them in the pantry. Stella curled around Mo, her body shielding him from the howling dark. The cub wasn't trembling, wasn't lost, just sleeping, one paw draped over Stella's scarred flank. Benjamin lit Sarah's last candle. Its glow revealed what he'd missed before. Mo's claws, once needle-sharp, now gently kneading Stella's fur like a contented kitten. Some fears fade when love becomes your compass. School buses arrived every Thursday now. Kids pressed against the enclosure fence as Mo demonstrated his superpower, finding hidden treats by sound alone. Stella supervised from her sunny rock, tail thumping whenever Mo succeeded. One little girl in a yellow dress whispered, "That dog's his seeing eye person." Benjamin didn't correct her. Some truths were simpler than science. Winter returned. Stella's steps grew slower, Mo's leaps more calculated. Benjamin's hands ached holding his coffee. Yet each morning, the trio still walked their land. Stella in the lead, Mo's nose at her tail, Benjamin's boots scraping behind. The vet called it a miracle. The rangers called it unnatural. The three of them, they just called it Tuesday. The blizzard of 23 buried the valley. When Benjamin fought his way to the enclosure at dawn, he found them. Stella tucked deep in the den, Mo sprawled atop her like a living blanket. The cub lifted his head, snow crusting his whiskers, and yowled until Benjamin crawled in with them. 3 hearts beat against the cold. None faltered. Benjamin found the tracks first. Tiny human sneakers beside Mo's paw prints. The orphaned girl from town had climbed the fence again. He nearly called out, until he saw her small hand resting on Mo's back as he guided her through the meadow. Stella trotted beside them, her tail wagging. Some healings go both ways. National Geographic ran at full page. Asterisk, the blind snow leopard and his seeing eye wolf. Asterisk, Benjamin framed the hate mail beside it. Angry biologists claiming the bond was unnatural. Stella chewed one letter into confetti. Mo slept through the drama. That night, Benjamin wrote his own caption on the photo's back. Asterisk, love doesn't care what's possible. Asterisk. Years later, when the rangers came, they found the tracks first. One set of boots between paw prints, leading into the high meadows. Up where the snow leopards sing, where the huskies run, where legends walk. The enclosure stood empty except for 3 things. A weathered collar with silver bells, a child's drawing of a white leopard and gray dog, and a single sentence carved into the gatepost.